All right, everybody. Welcome to the Capital Projects Fund Accelerator informational webinar. My name is Sarah Gardner. I support the Children's Cabinet in various projects supporting the early childhood system. We are going to have a slide deck to walk you through this opportunity. Hannah White from the Children's Cabinet is the grant compliance officer with the cabinet, and she'll walk you through the opportunity. But we'd like to turn it over to Melissa Rooker, the executive director of the cabinet, to do some welcome and table setting for us. Melissa.
Thanks very much, Sarah, and thank you to all of you who've taken time today to join us. I see names that are familiar and I see some new names, so I am hopeful that this is a useful use of time to listen to the parameters of a brand new grant opportunity that the Children's Cabinet is pleased to have to offer. We can advance the slide to the next one. Basically, the purpose of the webinar today is to review the terms of this new project that we're calling the Capital Projects Fund Accelerator. It differs from the previous Child Care Capacity Accelerator that we awarded at the end of June in some significant ways. So we want to be very careful to make sure we walk you through the terms that are conditions of the funding we have received. So they're not things we dreamed up to make everybody's lives one extra level more complicated. This is necessary to be in compliance with the source of funding from U.S. Treasury. We will walk you through the online resources that will be providing. It's similar support for those of you that did participate in the Child Care Capacity Accelerator. So we'll walk you through the web resources, the timeline, the elements of the application that you need to be mindful of. And certainly we'll leave some time for Q&A. Sarah's already introduced herself and the Hannah White, who is our new federal grant manager here at the Children's Cabinet. And then we also have Clayton Gerard from KU CPPR, who provides support with the Common App. And so, Hannah, if you're ready, we can turn it over to you to walk people through this new opportunity.
Yes, ma'am, I am. Thank you very much. I'm going to roll back just real quickly and we can go back over. So you see my name there. There's Sarah. You guys are all familiar with Sarah. And then
Hannah, I don't think we see the right version of the presentation.
One moment. What do you see?
Thing.
Really? Okay. Give me a second then.
While she does that, I'm going to go ahead and this would have been, hopefully you found this link already before, but here is the direct link to the RFP that has a lot of the information that we are going to cover today.
Do you have my front slide now?
No.
Okay. Can you share for me, Sarah?
I would be glad to, yes.
Okay. Sorry about that, guys.
Alrighty.
Are you guys seeing the right version or no?
Yeah, we're pretty close. I think if you go to play from start, we should be good. And we're on your presenter view. It's my fault. I messed you up.
That's okay. Give us a minute, but Hannah, do you want to go ahead and go
Yeah.
through the purpose and the outcomes, which are all in the first couple pages of your RFP? So apologies, guys.
Yep. So again, the purpose of this new opportunity is really to fund construction opportunities. And if you think specifically back to some of the issues that we were dealing with when COVID hit, some of the difficulties and barriers that were presented specifically were caused by separation of that child from the learning environment. So a lot of the emphasis on this new funding opportunity is going to be to combat some of those critical needs that were created by the COVID-19 pandemic, specifically how they apply to that early childhood educational environment. Specifically, though, we are again looking to increase the number of individuals that are receiving access to education, specifically early childhood education. And that includes increased access, so increased slots of full day, full year childcare for children that are birth to 5. That is, again, our emphasis. A new element as part of this grant opportunity, and this is a huge emphasis for the feds, is increased access to supports that enable work, including broadband. If you remember, during COVID, one of the biggest barriers that we had was sending kids home to learn and them not having access to the internet, not having tablets, not having laptops. And so from a community stance, one of the large outcomes that we're looking to see is how your community is increasing connectivity and reducing barriers to virtual learning, distance learning, things of that nature, and reducing barrier. Sarah, I don't know what. Okay. And again, these funds are purely for construction. So funding construction to expand the supply of these things. I'm going to keep moving forward. I can certainly, oh, here we go. In total, we're looking at awarding, killing it, Sarah. In total, we're looking at awarding 38 million. So there's not going to be a specific amount of awards that we're looking for. We're just looking to fund viable projects. So there's no individual cap or ceiling. And as you guys know, this is federal money. It's from the U.S. Treasury. So that's why there's so many stringent rules that we have to follow. It is going to be a monthly reimbursement schedule. If any of you are current Accelerator recipients, it'll follow the same format as that. And again, this is construction only, so this is not going to cover any personnel. It's not going to cover the operations and some of the things that we had a little bit more leeway with in previous funding rounds. And also no indirect is allowed out of these funds. Something that's also different from this project compared to the last is it's a different match amount. So for this, we're looking for 15% project asset match, and that can come about in a variety of ways. But what we're really looking to see here in a competitive application is community buy-in. So we need to know that even if a few of your staff, leave, that you have enough community partners that, the project doesn't fall apart, that it's not just one agency or one entity that's really pushing this community project. And so we do ask for an asset match that can be in a variety of ways, and we can talk about that another time, but it is different than the accelerator that we previously put out. And then we also need this to be sustainable, and we'll talk more about that, but we're looking for whatever investment that's made into the community to be sustainable much longer than that 5-year period. So go ahead. So if you go to the All In for Kansas Kids /community page, you can find all of these documents and artifacts. We also have this many of the same types of artifacts for Accelerator, the previous round. So if you're familiar with those, go to the same place. We've got FAQ documents that line out all types of, whatever you can imagine. And then the application itself is going to be through the Kansas Common App. It's very easy to use. It's pretty straightforward. And if you're familiar with it from a previous funding opportunity, we use it quite a bit at the Children's Cabinet. And there's also a lot of resources on there for how you can find the data that we're looking for in your application. And I will talk about that a little bit more in a few slides. Go ahead. So where we're at right now is the first round of funding is going to close. Our applications are due October 2nd at 5 p.m. And so that round, the project spending timeline, if you look down below, would be that November 2023 through September 2025. And then that second round of funding that will be opening up for the Capital Projects Fund, applications are due December 18th at 5 p.m. And so for that second round, we'll put forward the slate to the cabinet in February, and then you can see that that funding will begin March of 24 and run through September of 25. And additionally, and please don't leverage your plans on this, but there is a potential for a no-cost extension through June of 26. So be thinking about that, but please don't plan on that for viability. And I would also say, just given the different rounds that we have here, if you're somebody that maybe you put in an accelerator, a previous accelerator application, you weren't funded, or maybe you have some tweaking to do to your plan. Okay, think about which round is going to be better for you to apply to. So if you need time to get your community partners together and to put together a rock solid plan, then wait and apply in December. We have a certain amount of money, but we really want some viable projects. So don't stress and try and get an application in that isn't as strong by October. Okay, so just to kind of touch on some of the key elements and the really the purpose of this and why we're doing it. Like I said, think back to some of the issues that we were dealing with here in early childhood, 2-3 years ago, even a year and a half. What were the huge barriers to providing that quality early childhood education? A lot of it comes down to opportunities that are missing in the community. You certainly could. I'm going to be honest, your application would have to, I'm replying to Bonnie's question in the chat, I apologize. Your application would probably have to be significantly different to be rejected in October and then accepted in December. So for any application, go ahead, Sarah.
It might help Bonnie and others just to know that there's not really an advantage one over the other. It's really about project readiness. We want to get dollars out the door as quickly as possible because of the timeline that we are on with the source of the funding, but we also want to give communities the time they need to plan. So this is a little bit of us responding to the need to get money out the door quickly, but also to give those who need the time to take it and produce a solid application. So there really isn't an advantage one way or the other. We want to fund the good projects.
Yeah. So just remember, this is a competitive RFP process. So whatever makes you the best candidate, then that's when you need to put your application in, is the way that it reflects best on your project. So any application though has to enable all of these things. Okay, so you don't just get to pick one or the other. It's got to have all of these elements for at least 5 years and sustainable for 5 years. So obviously high quality childcare services, that's not an element that I need to explain to you, but some of the examples of the other things that we are looking for, health monitoring. So I know in a lot of communities there are clinicians, medical and mental health personnel that don't have somewhere to work out of. They don't have workspace. They don't have somewhere to see their clients. So think of this community project as, are there other subject matter experts, are there other support services that could utilize this building or this project to serve children and families? When you think about education services that help with work and employment. So, is it somewhere maybe that people from the community can come and fill out job applications or maybe work on their resume, try and acquire documentation to apply for more jobs, things like that. Sometimes these things sound very like a no-brainer, but for many people, just not being able to print something or not being able to have internet access is a huge barrier to gaining employment, maintaining employment, or even getting services for themselves and their families. So think about services that a family would utilize at maybe a family resource center or even the public library, things like that, and how can we bring families into a safe, clean space where they can access a variety of services. So, and then also that broadband element. And there is a specific, I think it's 100 megabytes per second, but there's this very specific level of quality of broadband that you have to be able to supply, but really that's just to reduce barriers of connectivity within your community. And I think we're all familiar with broadband projects, maybe small towns, or I know Wamego, for example, has one where their local internet provider has partnered with Commerce, and you can access high quality internet all over the city because it's just open and free. So that's what we're looking for when it talks about broadband. Yes, and then also if you have, I mean, think about the needs of your community. So if you're out in a rural community where even if you provide access to internet and you provide all of these other resources, somebody doesn't have a way to get there, then that's not viable. So be thinking about the specific needs of your community based on your environmental factors as well.
There was one question in the chat that I thought would be good to bring up now because it spoke to the timeline. So Jennifer asks, would project construction need to be completely finished with occupancy certificate by the end of the timeline?
And I will kick that back to you.
Yes, is the short answer, and that is because of our reporting requirements to U.S. Treasury as the funder. So they are wanting to see the impact of those funds. Melissa?
Sarah, before we flip this slide, I just want to emphasize, other than the childcare bullet point, everything else you see on this slide is a requirement placed on the funding by U.S. Treasury. So it's not us at the cabinet dreaming up new ways to make applying for and qualifying for this funding stream challenging or, you know, forcing that extra layer of creativity. This is a requirement of the funding program itself. It originated in the American Rescue Plan as a broadband line item when the separate the infrastructure bill that put major investment into the broadband space, when that all passed as a separate piece of legislation, Congress went back and retooled the criteria for this fund and allowed the construction of multi-purpose community facilities that improve access to work, education, and health monitoring, while also improving the broadband experience. So, and the transportation and the COVID-19 connection, because these are ARPA dollars. So all of those aspects of this funding are requirements we're not going to be able to budge on because it is a condition of the funding and the 5-year time frame. So just wanted to emphasize that.
Another nugget I will give you for the work and the education training is if you've not already connected with your local USD to learn about their CTE pathways, that is an excellent resource for this opportunity. And it doesn't necessarily have to be childcare. I mean, obviously we love childcare, right? So we love that pathway, but your community might be better served for maybe a mechanic or welding, something like that. We don't know what's going to best serve your community, but definitely if you've not talked to your local school district about their CTE pathways, that's going to be a really great work education element to try and tie in. So these are the application or the lead applicant requirements. We do have to have a single fiscal agent. And before even applying, we're going to need a lot of these things to be completed. So you can see there's an active SAM.gov account. If you're not familiar with those, you can find resources in the All In for Kansas Kids. They're all there, but these are especially I think the SAM.gov numbers, they take time to get. So please don't go to fill out your application if you've not already acquired these numbers thinking that there won't be a delay. It will cause a delay with your application. So go ahead and get those first. And then you also need to have, pretty strong documentation about community support and that local collaboration. And again, we're talking about a strong, viable application is going to be a team of partners, not just, you know, a couple of strong employees from one entity that are willing to shoulder this work. You've got to think of it, you know, in terms of if you lose 2 or 3 staff out of your center, you know, is there somebody else that can pick up this grant work if you don't have staff that manage this? So we certainly have to have that single fiscal agent and a community champion for the project. But beyond that, we want really strong documentation about how your community is going to support you and how you're working together. And think about the resources that you're already probably leaning on. So whether that's a home visiting model that's in your community, whether that's maybe some sort of like a mental health or a social work co-op. So these entities that already exist that have to collaborate, usually because of a lack of resources, it's a really great way to pull them all together and put some leverage behind you as a group. Again, we've already talked about that 15% asset match, and that is required just to ensure that your community is invested and has some ownership over the viability of the project. There's some policies and then Title VI policies. And if you go to the All In for Kansas Kids website, it's very clear the documentation that you would need if you look at the RFP attachments. But again, some of these things are going to take time. So inspections, collaborating with maybe the fire marshal, maybe collaborating with licensing, whoever it is that you're going to need to collaborate with to ensure that your space, that you've thought it out all the way. Please don't wait until the last minute where you're filling out the application online. And then also we are looking for somewhere in the group that you're applying with to have expertise and experience related to something of this level. You know, it potentially could be a significant amount of money and a huge lift, and so you need to be prepared to handle that. The programmatic reporting, the invoicing, all of that, because it is an ask. And then, yes, anything that you submit in your project plan or budget, so the deliverables that you think you're going to be able to line out, we need to be able to see that both in data and just in you know, editorial context. How do you plan on actually achieving these goals, and how are you going to measure your own achievement? So some knowledge of, you know, reporting and data management is very helpful in that competitive application.
Hannah, there are a couple questions that I think are relevant to this slide, so I want to pause and just read those to you. For the 15% matching funds, do pledges count as confirmed, or do the matching funds need to be cash in hand?
Sarah?
It depends
Actually,
on
I'll take this one. I think our preference for a strong application is that it's, I mean, think about how you would want to apply for a competitive RFP process. So I think we're going to give priority to somebody that has secure funding. We want viable projects.
I think the word pledge is a little, it's subjective. So if your pledge is contingent upon like if this fills that match and that triggers a confirmed dollar, then I would consider that something that is confirmed. But if it's just an ask that is out there that you are unsure of whether that will come in, that's going to make for a weaker submission. The next question that I think is related to this slide. So if I understand you correctly, this is for multi-purpose facility that provides these services all the time to the public, not just a child care center that offers space on occasion, such as once a month. And
Sarah, I think it's related to the next one too, that says this does not need to be childcare. This can just be a community group. I'll give a little backstory from before Hannah came on board the project. I submitted the application to U.S. Treasury for these funds in December of 2021. And we were finally approved to move forward with this project in July of 2023. The reason that it took over 18 months is because our initial proposal, when we heard that construction of community buildings for work, education, and healthcare monitoring, we wrote a proposal that centered child care facilities in the middle of that proposal. It was all about, hey, we want to expand access to childcare because working parents need that that enables them to go to work. children can be educated in preschool classrooms, and early childhood, we know, is such an important education period for developing brains, and obviously healthcare monitoring in the form of developmental screenings, healthcare screenings, telehealth rooms. We built all of that into our initial proposal, and U.S. Treasury looked at us and said, "What are you talking about?" They really wondered how a child care facility, it just was a topic new to them at the time. We went through a series of iterations where we rewrote our proposal and really honed in on criteria that they approved of and ultimately felt comfortable and confident in awarding to us. So you will see in the language of the RFP, we lifted directly from our proposal to U.S. Treasury to provide the guidance to you as applicants. So I would say the demonstration has to be that these are spaces built to benefit the community. So if you have a recurring training calendar, I think that's sufficient. If it's, hey, we have a community room that is available if somebody, like, there has to be some intentionality around the use of the space. So it isn't that it's 24/7, 365 in use for these things, but that it is a routinely used space, and it's not just available for someone to rent to have a birthday party or, just the child care program. We tried to demonstrate child care as meeting all of the criteria, and we were denied at first. So we're going to have to flow that responsibility down to applicants. To be successful, you will need to demonstrate that this is a multi-purpose facility. The big thing was that U.S. Treasury agreed to allow us to require childcare as a feature of this grant program. So here we are.
Okay, so if you are interested and you have reviewed your RFP and you have acquired those numbers that we talked about, and you've done some legwork, you've talked to some community partners, and you have a solid plan, this is the process that you will follow to apply. If you don't already have a Common App profile, you'll need to create one. That is where both the application, and then if you are selected, the programmatic reporting will happen through, so it's relevant regardless. And then you would select the Capital Projects Fund Accelerator application, follow your prompts. It's really pretty straightforward. And like I said, you are going to need the UEI number, and I think there's another number before you can even submit that application. So if you try to start and you haven't done that process, you won't be able to get anywhere. And then once you're confirmed eligible, then your application will expand.
And I want to just flag for those of you who may have gone and done the Child Care Capacity Accelerator application, the eligibility tab is a new feature that we have put in place because of all of the things Melissa just underscored as being required by Treasury. So you have to sort of attest that you are going to do all of those things that are requirements. It's just another check for you, and also to share a little bit about your scope with us before you actually get to see the entire application open up. So don't be alarmed if you don't see anything beyond the eligibility. That is intentional. Go through that process, attest that you will do all of those things that we have outlined already, and then the full scope of questions will open up to you.
So is it just an attestation, or does it need to be reviewed?
It's essentially it's a series of yes, no questions that are saying that you will do it. And then it's an automatic trigger. So you're not waiting on anybody to do that. So assuming you have a project that meets all of the eligibility requirements, the application will open up to you immediately.
Wonderful. And this is just a high level overview of the elements that you're going to have to fill out. And I cannot stress enough to, if more is more here, Oftentimes we get into an application and we're looking for things that you assume that we know, and sometimes if they're not lined out in black and white, we don't know them. So this is going to be very competitive. Specifically though, I would like to highlight description, and well, we'll just work through them. But the need especially, I would refer you to the All In for Kansas Kid, those resources. If you're not already familiar with ways to find data about the community that you're representing, there's Child Care Aware's point in time data, but we do want hard data. We want you to be able to support your ask for funds and to be able to support your we know there's a need across Kansas, but we want you to be able to articulate your specific need for your community and why the proposal that you have is going to match that need, right? If you live in a community that has 42 to 1 infant, spots, and you have a wait list of 42 people waiting for that one infant spot, and you're not going to create any infant slots in your childcare center, that's not necessarily going to behoove your community. So look at what your community needs and please include that data in your application. And then also the impact. The impact is one of the places that I really look to see how are we getting something out of this. Okay. But really, I mean, think about all of these elements and the lifespan of a child and or a child and their family. How do all of these elements, that work, education, childcare, how is it going to impact that individual's overall quality of life? So think about those project outcomes as how you're going to transform your community, because that's what we're looking for. I think we have, yep. Operational viability and sustainability, we've touched on this before, but all of those elements have to remain viable, sustainable throughout the life of the project. And then please include, your revenue sources and all of that. And you should be familiar with our process if you've applied for Accelerator, the budget template and funding. It's all a template. It's very easy to fill out. It auto populates for you or auto calculates. And then the attachments, every single one of them is required. So if you don't have, let's say, tax clearance, or you don't have, etc., we'll kick it back. So go ahead and review the attachment portion of the RFP before you submit to make sure you have what you need, especially if there's any, delays, if you have to make a request for one of those items, and your assurances. And then you can also find links for TA there. And Sarah, I will let you answer Kim's sustainability question.
Renewable grants be part of sustainability. Yeah, I think if you have, particularly if you have a track record of securing grant funding, we know a lot of nonprofits, that is how they keep the doors open, but we do want to understand the plan behind that. So one thing that's different between this and previous accelerators, we are going to ask you for a little bit of a business plan or a sustainability plan to actually describe that process to us so that we aren't just looking at your project budget, but we're looking at your plan, broadly speaking, in your own words.
Again, that is because of the criteria we are responsible to demonstrating back to U.S. Treasury. So this is a bigger lift for everyone involved to meet the compliance requirements of the funding source. The requirement is that we are building buildings that will remain operational for a 5-year period for the purpose intended in the application that is submitted. And I know, there's risk. We have to prove that we have done a risk analysis, and we have to submit metrics and lots of information that is a lot more stringent for us. So that is the requirement that is also incumbent on successful applicants to shoulder a share of that responsibility.
I want to note and just underscore the attachments. We have learned a little bit from the last accelerator round that you're going to be asked to upload several things that you're going to have to get from other people. So it isn't just your own creation of attachments. If you have a delay in any of that progress or process, so for example, if you are securing an Office of State Fire Marshal letter and you don't have that, please upload your progress to date in securing that. So we understand we are trying to get dollars out the door very quickly, and that doesn't always align with other timelines. We want you to start ASAP so that you can meet those requirements. But if you don't have that, we want to know that you have started the process and that you have like gotten to a certain point that we can feel confident that your project is going to meet fire marshal code. And this is very specific in our lessons learned to some of the childcare facilities, but we know that in funding multi-purpose facilities, you're going to have other requirements that are needed. So please give us every reason to feel confident in your progress to date at the time you submit that application. We'd love to see confirmation, but if nothing else, give us a detailed outline of what you've done to date so far.
I see a question in the chat from Jennifer. It says, do all criteria elements minus childcare need to be offered for free to the community, or can fees be charged for certain programs? So the example I would give is if, let's say you're partnering with a mental health co-op, right? And you have a kid that's Part C eligible coming over for their behavioral health or their
okay, I guess take it back then. All right.
or their services. No, certainly not. You're providing the resource of the.
I think we're talking about membership fees and things like that in this question, Hannah. Sarah, help me remember the specific questions we had to respond to Treasury along these lines.
Yeah.
I'm looking at our.
Yeah. We have to, this is going back a couple slides, the bit about being able to provide data, like as an applicant, you are going to be accountable for some data back. So if you are earning revenue from the services, that will be something we ask you to share. So it is not that you cannot earn revenue, but if you do, we will be asking you for that information because that will be something we have to submit to Treasury. So you'll even see in the application attachments, we're going to ask you for those funding sources. And if you're charging for any of the services you provide, do you have sliding fee scales? What is your general revenue source? Are you billing Medicaid for those services? Are they membership fees? Are they coming from clients or consumers? So, and that is all because that will be something that will trigger for us that if you're funded, we'll have to do that additional follow-up with you on a regular basis so we can submit that to Treasury if you're awarded.
Okay, I am not seeing any other questions in the chat. Oh, no, we have two more. Can you have a resource center and the child care center not in the same building? You could do whatever makes sense for your application. I don't know why that would be an advantage to not have them in the same building, especially if you're.
Well,
Melissa.
I guess I'm thinking about this in terms of if the funds have to be used to build the multi-purpose community facilities. If you're contemplating a campus where you are building a childcare center that is separate from your resource center or your community building, or whatever, we might want to learn more from you about the background of that question. But I would say the funds have to be used to construct a project that meets the overall award criteria. So in terms of the specific layout and design, that's something that we could entertain on a case-by-case basis. But we can't, I don't know that we'll be able, I don't know that an application that says, well, we want this funding to build this specific facility that adds on to something that exists. I'm not sure that is allowed. Like, we would have to do some vetting on our end as part of our review to understand where the line gets drawn for what we can and can't fund. So I would be careful, and that can be part of the TA that you seek individually. Question, the question of childcare fees. Yeah, obviously that is a fee for service that would be provided. It falls into that same category that Sarah explained.
So from here on out, if you guys have questions, feel free to use this Accelerator email. It will go to a number of us, so multiple people will see it at one time, and it just helps us keep everything straight. So that's preferred rather than reaching out to one of us independently.
Realize I took the slides down. They're also on the page that you go to find the RFP and all the other resources. There is a TA link. You can click on that link and you'll be directed to submit your question. Again, that goes to several of us so that we can respond to your question quickly. So even if you didn't get a chance to capture that email address, just when you go to that RFP page, even in the Common app, when you see a TA resource, there'll be a link there for you to click on and get access to the support that you need. And we would be happy to talk to you very specifically about your project in detail, because we know this is layered.
Yeah, so the question in the chat is whether we're looking for a separate building, not construction to expand on an existing building that includes the community center and childcare functions. I would say major renovation should be allowable, but again, we can take this on a case-by-case basis. I think what I'm trying to communicate is we cannot fund construction of simply a child care center to add on to the pre-existing thing. What we are responsible for building is the community facility. So I'm trying to convey that it might be 3 separate pods that you build on a piece of land. It might be a vacant building that's renovated. It may be something that exists that we add on to create this new spectrum of services, but we can't just pick one of those things and build that thing and say we've met the criteria of the award. So specific scenarios can be addressed in one-on-one TA conversations. We're happy to have those.
To Sharon, I would say, yeah, meet with your community partners and see what's viable. See what are the needs in your community. Do you have workforce needs? Do you have young people that aren't being funneled into high-paying jobs? Do you have, people that don't have places to apply for jobs? What is the need in your community? Go meet with your partners and see if it's a good fit.
We see family resource centers, we see community programs that have wraparound services all housed under one roof. We see a lot of models across the state. We're happy to work with you on the specifics of what your community might be thinking. So again, we're happy to provide TA and answer specific questions that speak to the characteristics of your particular project.
Okay, so Sarah has dropped that link one more time into the chat. So if you want to go check that out, and if you have any questions, just use that generic Accelerator email and somebody will get right back with you. It goes to about 12,000 people at the same time. So somebody will know that you have a question.
No.
There's like 3 of us, just kidding.
There's 3, yeah.
There's 3 people that all have a decent level of knowledge. So please reach out if you have questions. We want you all to be successful. We want this to be, transformational for Kansas. So whatever we can do to help you get through it, just please let us know. And thank you for your time and spending your 1 o'clock hour with us.